My daughter listed my house for sale on the 23rd of March. She didn't ask me. She didn't leave a note on the counter or call the night before. The for sale sign went into my front lawn while I was picking up a prescription on Concession Street, and when I turned back onto my block with 2 bags of groceries and saw it standing there in the soft mud between the sidewalk and the road, I thought for one strange second that I was on the wrong street. I wasn't. That's my house. It's the yellow one with the green shutters and the old lilac bush at the corner of the porch that blooms every May, whether it's been a hard winter or not. Frank planted it this spring after we moved in 1987. He put it too close to the eavesdrows, and every few years I have to call someone to cut it back. It blooms anyway, deep purple, slightly scraggly, smelling like the whole of April. That bush has outlived him by 6 years. Welcome to Bold Mom Stories, where women who get counted out before the game is over get to say what actually happened. Subscribe and stay to the end. What happens in a lawyer's office on a Wednesday morning in May is the whole reason I'm telling you this. My name is Iris. I'm 67 years old. I live at the same address in Hamilton, Ontario, that I have lived at since my daughter was 8 months old. Frank and I bought this house in August of 1987 for $84,000. The real estate agent told us the neighborhood was on its way up. She was right, eventually. For the first 3 years, we ate a lot of pasta and didn't turn the heat past 18 degrees. Frank died 6 years ago. He was 66. Stroke, overnight, no warning. One Tuesday, he was raking the backyard, and the next Thursday, I was choosing a casket. I have made 2 cups of coffee every single morning since, because it's the one habit from 38 years of marriage that I still can't break for myself. I make 2 cups, I drink one, the other one sits. People ask what I did for work, and I say I was a law clerk. That's accurate and also a way of ending a conversation before it starts. What I actually did for 26 years was sit at a desk at a real estate law firm on Main Street West and process property transactions from the moment a deal was signed to the moment it closed. Purchases, sales, refinances, estate transfers, powers of attorney. I registered documents at the Land Registry Office. I read every single one of them because that was my job, and if you read enough of them, you stop thinking of legal documents as paperwork and start thinking of them as what they are. Decisions someone made on a specific day, written down so they can't be unmade quietly. Remember that. It matters later. My daughter is 43. She has her father's eyes and a way of talking that's just slightly faster than the thought behind it. She's been with my son-in-law for 18 years. They met when they were both working at a sporting goods chain up near the Link, and she thought he was ambitious. He is ambitious. The problem with ambition, as I've come to understand it, is that it has a very short memory. In 2019, my son-in-law opened a fitness studio in the East End. One of those monthly membership places with turf floors and motivational quotes painted on the walls. It did well enough that by 2022, he had opened a second location in Ancaster. When interest rates started climbing and people stopped paying for things they could cancel, he had 2 leases, 2 sets of equipment loans, and a membership base that was quietly disappearing. By last fall, they were carrying somewhere around $240,000 in combined debt, and he had started talking about my house the way people talk about things they've already decided on. He has never once in 18 years asked to sit down and have a real conversation with me. He talks at me through my daughter, and she edits it into something softer before it arrives. The softer version arrived on a Sunday in February. My daughter brought a casserole and a brochure for a place called Maple Ridge Gardens, a retirement community in Dundas. Lovely photographs, a woman in a beige cardigan tending raised herb beds, swimming pool, shuttle service on Tuesdays. Studios starting at $3,800 a month, which told me exactly what the math looked like from their side of the table. She set the brochure down and slid it toward me. I put the kettle on. She said the house was too big for one person. It's a 3-bedroom semi-detached. I have lived in this much house for one person since Frank died. Nobody has mentioned the square footage in 6 years. She said the roof would need replacing. We did the roof in 2018. She said the stairs were getting harder. There are 4 stairs to my front porch. Then she turned to the window and said, a sentence I have thought about every day since. She said, "She just can't keep up with the place the way she used to." She said it to the backyard, not to me, even though I was standing 4 feet away with a kettle in my hand. I poured the water. I let the tea steep. I asked her who she had spoken to before she spoke to me. She looked at the brochure. That was my first answer. The second answer came when she said my son-in-law had found a real estate agent who specializes in this kind of transition. Those were the words she used. This kind of transition, as if I were a file to be moved from one folder to another. I sat down across from her. I asked what the agent had said. She said he'd done a market analysis. She said the market was strong right now, and if we waited, we'd be leaving money on the table. We. That pronoun. I noticed it the way you notice a draft from a window you thought was closed. And where would I be, I asked, while we weren't leaving money on the table? She tapped the brochure. She still hadn't looked at me. "You'll be fine there, Mum." That's the whole sentence. 5 words delivered to a glossy photograph of an herb garden. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I asked if she wanted more tea, and she said no, she had to get going, and she left the brochure on my kitchen table. I read it after she backed out of the driveway. Studio units at Maple Ridge Gardens have in-suite laundry and large windows with east-facing light. There's a memory care wing on the 3rd floor. I put the brochure in the drawer with the takeout menus, and I went outside and stood by Frank's lilac for a while because I needed to be somewhere he had been. Now, to be fair to my daughter, and I'm going to be fair to her, because the truth about what drove this is more complicated than the story you're expecting. In 2018, I had hip surgery. Planned replacement, routine, but I was going under general anesthetic, and I was 63 years old, and I wanted my affairs in order. I signed a continuing power of attorney for property, naming my daughter as my attorney. I did it correctly with a witness and a commissioner of oaths, and I registered it at the land registry office because I understood what registration meant. It put the world on notice. My daughter had a copy. I had a copy. The record had it on file. I meant it when I signed it. She was the person I trusted. Here is what happened in the spring of 2022 that changed that. My son-in-law's first studio was struggling, and he needed liquidity. He had my daughter use the power of attorney to apply for a home equity line of credit against my property. Her signature, 4 legal words underneath. Pursuant to power of attorney, $85,000 against my house. I found out because a mortgage specialist from the bank called to verify a detail on the file. I hadn't spoken to anyone at that bank about any loan. I told her so. There was a pause on the line, the kind of pause that means both people have understood something at the same moment. The application was already in underwriting. I called my daughter. She confirmed it. She said my son-in-law had said it was just paperwork, just to see if they qualified, just to see. I told her I was revoking the power of attorney. She cried. She said I was overreacting. She said he was under a lot of stress. I told her that stress is not a legal defense for signing someone else's name on a mortgage application. The HELOC was canceled. I called a lawyer I'd worked alongside for 12 years at the firm, explained the situation, and the following week she helped me draft a revocation of the power of attorney. 3 paragraphs. It named the original document by its registration number. It stated that the power was revoked in its entirety and that any person dealing with the property was on notice. I took it to the land registry office on James Street North, paid the registration fee, and watched the clerk enter it into the system. Then I mailed a certified copy to my daughter. Registered mail, return receipt requested, because 26 years in a law firm teaches you to be able to prove the things you've said. The green card came back 10 days later. There is a signature on the delivery confirmation. It is not my daughter's handwriting. I put it in a folder in the hall cupboard and said nothing. We have not spoken about it since. Not once in 3 years. It sat between us the way certain things do. Not forgotten, just agreed to be left in the corner of the room. Until March. The agent came on the 12th. He was in his late 40s, well-pressed, the kind of man who uses the word absolutely as punctuation. He walked through my house in 11 minutes and told me the roof looked like it might be original. It isn't. He said the kitchen would be a quick cosmetic refresh for the right buyer, which is how agents say it's dated without saying it's dated. He was not unkind. He had a mother in a condo in Burlington, and he said she loved the lifestyle. He said it twice. At the door on his way out, I asked him whether he understood that I lived here. He gave me a look I recognized from 30 years of watching people receive information they find inconvenient. Of course, he said. But these decisions are really a family matter, Mrs. Pemberton. I've helped a lot of families through this. 2 weeks later, my daughter signed the listing agreement. She signed it as attorney, in fact, which she was no longer. The listing went live on MLS at $549,000. The agent sent me an email with the link. He CC'd me the way you'd CC a landlord. I printed the listing at the library. I read it at my kitchen table with Frank's pencil. He was a carpenter, kept a red mechanical pencil in his apron for marking cuts. And when he died, I put it in the cup by the kettle where he always left it when he came in from the garage. I underlined the words attorney, in fact, and I underlined the date. Then I put the printout in the folder with the green card. The lockbox appeared on a Monday, black about the size of a fist, hanging off the door handle on a rubberized hook. I don't have the code. Nobody offered it. The agent hung it while I was in the backyard and gave it a tug to make sure it held. And when he saw me watching from the side gate, he said it was easier this way. Saves you having to be home for every showing. Saves me. Everything they did that spring, they did to save me. That evening, I went to the garage. Frank's bolt cutters are on the pegboard between the pipe wrench and a coil of yellow extension cord. 20-inch handles. I took them down. I stood in the dark with them for a while, and then I hung them back up. Not because of strategy, though strategy was part of it. The bigger part was that if I cut that lockbox off my door, my daughter would come the next morning and put a new one on. And then I'd know the thing I was still hoping wasn't true. That there was no version of this where she stopped on her own. I went inside. I left the light on over the stove. The lockbox stayed on my door for 7 weeks. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking, why didn't she just say no in February and be done with it? I'm going to tell you, because if I let you think it was cleverness, I'd be lying, and this whole story falls apart if I lie to you. There are 2 reasons. The first one has a face I won't describe for her sake, but she lives 2 streets over. Her son decided she shouldn't be managing her own finances. She disagreed loudly in her kitchen one Sunday afternoon. 4 months later, her son filed an application for guardianship of her person and property at the Ontario Court of Justice. The supporting affidavit had 2 paragraphs describing that Sunday: agitated, combative, unable to accept appropriate assistance. She spent nearly $30,000 on a lawyer and she won. She kept her accounts. She also stopped having people over, and something in her that used to be loud went very quiet and never came back. When my daughter put that brochure on my table, I called a lawyer I'd worked alongside for 12 years. She said something I have repeated to myself maybe 100 times since. She said, "If you fight this in your kitchen, you lose. Not because you're wrong, because the kitchen is their room. Anything you say in there becomes a description of your mental state. You need a room where what you say doesn't matter, where the only thing that matters is what's written down." I told her I knew exactly the room. That's the practical reason. Here's the other one, and it's the one I'd rather not say. I was waiting for my daughter to stop. Every single one of those 7 weeks, I woke up and thought, today is the day she pulls into the driveway and comes up those 4 steps and says, "Mom, I got ahead of myself. That's all it would have taken." One sentence at my door, and I'd have handed her a coffee, and we would have never spoken of it again, and I'd have gone to my grave, saying my daughter had a bad year. She didn't come. My neighbor Marta has lived directly across the street from me since 1994. We've traded zucchini and dill and the occasional bottle of something for 30 years. She is Croatian and she makes a walnut roll at Christmas that I have been failing to replicate since 2003. The for sale sign went in on a Friday. By Saturday, she was at my door with a pot of chicken soup, which in our friendship is the universal language, for I have heard something, and I need to look at your face. She held my arms at the door. You just say the word, she said. If it's too hard, if you're not. She didn't finish, which is how I knew exactly how the sentence ended. Then she said my daughter had called her the week before. She'd told Marta I'd been having some little memory lapses. Nothing serious, she'd said. Just little things. I thanked Marta for the soup. I said I was fine. I went inside. The showing started the week after. I could hear the lockbox knock against the doorframe every time someone opened it. The stager came and moved my furniture and put Frank's shop trophy in a box labeled personal items. She said buyers couldn't connect with a space when there were too many personal things. My daughter came one Saturday with boxes and a label maker. She was efficient and cheerful in the way people are when they've been planning something for a long time and are finally allowed to begin. She started in the den. Around 2 in the afternoon, I came out of the back bedroom and found her standing at the hall closet with Frank's winter coat folded over her arm. It's a Carhartt. Brown, fleece lining worn through at both pockets. He wore it every winter for 20 years. It has hung on the same hook in that closet since the week he died, because that's where he always put it when he came in from the garage. She was reaching for a garbage bag. It's got a tear in the lining, Mum, she said. I'm just going to. I took it out of her hands. I didn't pull. I just put my fingers around the collar and lifted, and she let go. And neither of us said anything for about 5 seconds. Then she wrote a question mark on a label and stuck it to the box by the door. And I understood that was exactly where I was heading eventually. A question mark in someone else's box. The open house was the 3rd Saturday in April. The agent texted me the evening before, best if you're not on site during showings. Buyers get uncomfortable with the owner present. On Saturday morning, I put on my good blouse, walked across the street, and sat on Marta's front step with 2 coffees from Tim Hortons and watched people go through my house. 17 groups. I counted. A young couple stood in my driveway for 4 minutes studying the roofline. A man in a Canada Goose jacket opened my mailbox for no reason I could identify. 2 women came out talking about the kitchen, and one of them said everything's original, and they both laughed, which is how people laugh when they mean something they'd rather not say directly. At about 1 o'clock, a family came out with a little girl, maybe 5 years old. She grabbed the lilac at the corner of the porch the way children grab things, and a branch came off clean in her hand. A full stem, 4 buds on it that were never going to open now. Her father told her to put it down. She dropped it on the walk. Nobody picked it up. Marta said, very quiet, "Oh, Iris." I said, "It's a tough plant." I didn't cry on that step, not because I'm strong, because Marta was watching, and I understood by then that everything I did was being collected as evidence of something. They accepted an offer in the first week of May. $498,000. The buyers were a couple in their early 30s, both teachers pre-approved through their credit union. 30-day close. The agent emailed me a copy of the accepted offer the way you'd forward a receipt. My daughter called that evening. She was warm in a way she hadn't been in months. "Good news," she said. We got close to asking. She said my son-in-law was already calling Maple Ridge Gardens about availability. She said I didn't need to worry about a thing. Tara would handle the packing. She said she would handle all of it. We again, that pronoun turning up like a bad check. I said okay. I asked about the closing date. May 28th, she said. You don't even need to be there. It's all handled. I hung up. I got Frank's pencil out of the cup. On the back of a grocery receipt, I wrote 3 things: the closing date, the buyer's names, and the name of the law firm listed on the transaction documents. Because in Ontario, real estate doesn't close through a title company. It closes through a lawyer's office. And I wanted to know which lawyer would be running the title search on the morning of the 28th. On the 12th of May, I drove to the Land Registry office. In Ontario, you can search the parcel register for any property, a full history of every document ever registered against it. I asked for mine. The clerk printed it out, 6 pages, raised seal $11 and change. I read it standing at the counter because I wanted to be in a room when I read it. There was the original deed from 1987, the mortgage discharge in 2001, a refinance in 2009, the affidavit of survivorship I had registered after Frank died, which moved the property from joint tenancy into my sole name. And then 2 more entries. The first, document number 2008-42917, continuing power of attorney for property. Grantor, Iris Joan Pemberton. Attorney, my daughter. Registered October 2018. The second, document number 2022-81043, revocation of power of attorney. Registered September 14, 2022 at 9:02 in the morning. 3 paragraphs, my signature, the commissioner's seal, stating in plain language that the power of attorney was revoked in its entirety and that any person dealing with the property was on notice. 4 years. That revocation had been sitting in the public record for 4 years, indexed under my name, accessible to anyone who walked in off King Street and paid $11. Not hidden, not sealed. Available on the same morning the agent accepted a listing, signed under a power of attorney he had never verified was still valid. Nobody had looked. I folded the certified copy and put it in my purse alongside the green card. I drove home past the Tim Hortons on Upper James, where Frank used to stop every Saturday, and I thought about what I had actually been waiting for. My granddaughter found out on a Thursday in April, not from me, but from a post her mother had shared on Facebook with the caption, "Big changes ahead for Grandma," and 2 heart emojis. She drove to my house after her afternoon shift at the walk-in clinic in Stony Creek, where she works as a medical receptionist. She's 22. She has the kind of directness that skips the part where you work up to saying the thing. She stood on my porch and looked at the lockbox. "Grandma," she said, "what is that doing on your door?" I told her. She sat down on the step in her scrubs and cried, which I was not prepared for. She said she'd called her mother, and her mother had told her to stay out of it. She said she'd come to the closing and stand up and make a scene. She said she'd record everything. I said no. I told her if she made a scene, the story would become a family fighting, and everyone in that room would choose the version easiest to believe about a 67-year-old woman living alone in a big house. The version where she can't quite manage. She looked at me. She said, "So you're just going to let them do it?" I said I was going to let them get all the way to the end. She was quiet for a second longer than a 22-year-old usually stays quiet. Then she said, "Okay, but I'm bringing you coffee every week until this is over." She did, every Thursday on her way to work. She never once talked about me in the third person while I was standing in the room. The evening before closing, I called my lawyer friend at home. She allows it twice per client. I told her the closing was at 10 the next morning. She was quiet for a moment. She said, "You understand what happens the morning of closing." I said they run a title search. That is the most routine thing in Canadian real estate. Before any solicitor certifies title and releases funds, they pull the parcel register one final time, a last check for anything registered since the original search. New liens, new documents, anything at all. It happens on every transaction in this country, every business day. Nobody thanks anybody for it. She said, "And the revocation is still there." I said, "Nobody's asked me to discharge it. Nobody's called me at all." She asked if I wanted her there with me. I said no. If my lawyer walks in, it's my lawyer making a move. If I walk in alone with my driver's license and my purse, it's just a woman sitting at the end of a table while a solicitor does her job. The record doesn't need an advocate. That's the entire point of a record. She said, "Don't explain anything. Don't help them. They'll get there on their own." I said I had no intention of helping. I put 2 certified copies in my purse, the revocation and the green card with its looping unfamiliar signature. I laid out my good blouse for the morning. I put my driver's license in the outside pocket of my purse so I wouldn't be fumbling at a table full of people. I slept about 3 hours. At 5:30 I got up, made 2 cups of coffee, and stood at the kitchen window and watched the light come up over a street that 6 people had already spent. I thought, this morning, someone is going to read the record out loud. May 28th, Wednesday. The law firm is on the 9th floor of an office building on King Street East. The conference room has a long mahogany table and a window that looks toward the escarpment. A box of Kleenex in the center, which tells you everything you need to know about what gets signed in rooms like this. I arrived at 9:45. I sat at the end of the table with my purse in my lap. The buyers came in first. They were kind and a little nervous, the way people are at the best version of something they've been saving toward. They had a folder with printed mortgage documents and a photo of their dog clipped to the front cover. Their agent sat beside them. The agent who had listed my house came in with 2 pens. My son-in-law came in on his phone. My daughter came in with a travel mug and sat at the far end of the table, not beside me. She put her hand briefly on the back of my chair when she passed, not on my shoulder, on the chair. Then the solicitor came in. She was in her early 40s, dark jacket, reading glasses on a chain. She introduced herself, set down a stack of documents, and opened her laptop. She asked for photo identification from everyone signing. I slid my driver's license across the table. My daughter slid hers. The solicitor looked at my daughter's ID against her sheet and said, "And you're signing as attorney, in fact, today?" My daughter said yes. The solicitor said, "I'll need the power of attorney on file. A certified copy is fine." My daughter had one. She'd had it since 2018, folded in her home files in a folder labeled Mum. She put it on the table. The solicitor entered the document number into her system. Then she was quiet for about 4 seconds. She looked at her screen. She looked again. Then she said, "Give me 1 moment, please." She typed something. She made a short call to someone she referred to as the clerk on file. She said, "Can you confirm what came up on the title rundown this morning?" The document number and the type. "Thank you." She put the phone down. She said, "I want to make sure everyone understands what I've found before we go any further, because I can't close this transaction until we've spoken about it." My son-in-law said, "Is there a problem?" She said, "There's a registration on title that affects the authority under which this listing was signed." She turned her laptop screen slightly so everyone could see. She said she was going to walk through the parcel register in order. It was faster that way. She read it like a list, no drama, clear and flat. The 1987 deed, the mortgage discharge, the refinance, the affidavit of survivorship in 2016. Then she turned to the second last page. Document 288-4291 she said. Continuing power of attorney for property. Grantor, Iris Joan Pemberton. Attorney, my daughter, registered October 12, 2018. That's the instrument submitted today as authority to list and sign on the owner's behalf. My son-in-law said, "Right, that's hers. She signed it." The solicitor said, "There is one more document on the register. Document number 2022-81043. Registered September 14, 2022 at 9:02 in the morning. Revocation of power of attorney. It names the 2018 instrument by registration number. It states the power is revoked in its entirety and that any person dealing with the property is on notice." Nobody moved. She looked at my daughter. She said, "The authority under which the listing agreement was signed ceased to exist in September of 2022. The listing agreement is therefore not binding on the owner of record. Without valid authority, I cannot certify title. Without certified title, the lender won't release funds. I'm not able to close this transaction today." My daughter said, "That can't be right. The power of attorney is registered. It's right there." The solicitor said, "The revocation is also registered. The later document supersedes." My son-in-law stood up fast enough that his chair hit the wall. He said, "This is her doing. She's been sitting on this the whole time. How long have you known about this?" I didn't answer him. My daughter looked at me. She said, "Mom, what is this?" I reached into my purse. I took out the green card, the registered mail return receipt, postmarked September 2022. I put it on the table and slid it toward the center. I said, "I mailed you a certified copy of the revocation the week I registered it. That's the delivery receipt." She looked at it. I said, "That isn't your signature in the confirmation box." She went very still for 1 second. Then she looked at her husband. And I watched her face in that moment, and I understood that she had not known, that he had signed for the mail and said nothing, and she had trusted him the way you trust people before you have a reason not to. That was the hardest thing in the room that morning, and it had nothing to do with me. The listing agent started to say something about family decisions. The solicitor said, "Property law doesn't ask about family decisions. It asks about what's registered on title. The revocation has been on the public record since September of 2022. That's the record I'm bound by." The buyer's agent asked carefully whether there was any way to resolve this. The solicitor said, "Only voluntarily, with the registered owner's consent and signature." 7 faces turned toward me at once. I stood up once that whole morning. I picked up my driver's license and put it back in the outside pocket of my purse. I looked at my daughter, not my son-in-law, not the agent, my daughter, and I said 4 words. "I'm not signing today." Then I said good morning to the buyers. I told them I was sorry they had been put in this position, and I meant every word of it. The woman thanked me. She looked like she wanted to say more, but couldn't find what it was. I walked out of that conference room, down 9 floors in an elevator that moved very slowly, out onto King Street in the May sunshine, and I sat in my car for several minutes before I could trust my hands on the wheel. The listing was withdrawn from MLS on the 30th of May. Here is what the next few weeks actually cost in numbers, because feelings are hard to audit. The buyers were out an appraisal and a home inspection, and an application fee. I sent them a check for the total and a note that said none of this was your fault and I hope you find something good. The woman wrote back. She sent a photo of the dog. I put it on the fridge. I filed a complaint with the Real Estate Council of Ontario about the agent who had accepted a listing without verifying the legal authority of the person signing it. Verifying the capacity and authority of a listing client is a basic professional obligation. He had not done it. I filed in writing calmly with every document attached. I made a report to the Ontario Office of the Public Guardian and Trustee. A worker came out and sat at my kitchen table for over an hour and read every page in the folder. She said most referrals they receive are a feeling and a phone call. She said, "This is an actual file." I signed a new continuing power of attorney for property, naming my granddaughter with clear written conditions. And then I went out to the garage and took Frank's bolt cutters off the pegboard and cut that lockbox off my front door in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon. It took about 2 seconds. 53 days of that thing knocking against my door every time a stranger came through it, and it took 2 seconds. Marta saw it from her driveway. She came across the street and stood on the walk and didn't say anything for a while. Then she said, "Nobody asked you a single thing, Iris. Not one of us." I said, "You're asking now." She crossed her arms and looked at the lilac, which was still in full bloom because May in Hamilton is, in a good year, exactly that. My daughter and I speak about once a month now, not about the house, about small things, careful things. She is working through some things about her marriage that are not mine to have opinions about out loud. The fitness studios are both closed. That is its own story, and it is hers to tell. People keep telling me I outmaneuvered my family. I want to be precise, I did not. There was no strategy more complex than this. I signed a document in 2022. I registered it at the Land Registry Office on James Street North. I paid a small fee, and I mailed a copy. That's all. The revocation sat in a public record for 4 years, available to anyone who walked in off the street and asked for a parcel register. It costs less than a lunch. Any one of those people. The agent, the lawyer they used to draft the listing, my son-in-law, who thought he had read everything that mattered, could have found it on any morning for 4 years if they had thought to look. They didn't look because they were so certain about what I was that they never bothered to check what I had. You cannot take something from someone you've been listening to. So here is the only thing I know that's worth saying, and I'll keep it to one sentence. They can decide what you are in every room except the one where someone reads the public record out loud. Go find out what your record says while you still have the choosing of it. It costs almost nothing, and it's already yours. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.